Good morning to all of you, and that's my utmost pleasure to greet Katinka Soetens with us here today. And I would like to introduce beautiful, wonderful, fabulous woman who you really should know.
Thank you so much for having me to talk with you today. It's lovely to be here with you all.
I'm very happy that you accepted this invitation to have an interview with you because what I found about it is not a career, I would say, it's a path, a genuine wisdom keeper's path, a medicine woman's path. And it's only about 20 years that in some ways I'm following your path. And it's only the couple of last 10 years that I'm, let's say, more closely connected to you. But that's little time I've been following you made me the inner desire that I really would like to invite you to Hungary, which we did. So that's going to be a third or fourth time you're going to come to Hungary under my organization because you've been visiting Hungary much before as well. And you do have a connection to the Carpathian Basin as well. So I would like you to introduce yourself, not just through my eyes, but how you live, what you are exactly do as your mission, and how the whole thing unfolded.
Thank you so much, Nicoletta. Yes, it is a path. That's very correct. And not so many people get that, I think. There is a, a reclaiming of the path of the priestess of the goddess. Uh, I'm standing like many of my compatriots who are also doing this, living this in this life again, reclaiming this for ourselves as women. Um, we're standing on the shoulders of great forerunners who have come before us. And I love this connection. We're like beads on a string, so that hopefully more and more people can find their own way back into their own personal, deeper connection with the divine feminine, with the feminine source, with the cosmic mother, with the great goddess, whatever word, with the golden ladies, whatever word we want to name, we want to give this aspect that has been really diminished, denied, and not allowed in patriarchic culture and religion. So it is actually really quite a thing, as you say, to walk this as a path, as really as a path. And then for
Yeah,
me, there's something around the reclaiming in that, in the divine feminine, really as deity. And what that means, not just as a goddess on the outside in the temple, which is fantastic, of course, and very much part of our European heritage. We are actually sitting on paganism, not as this boo-boo, horrible, scary, they're the nasty ones, they're the witches and the burning times and all this persecution, angst driven by the Inquisition and by extreme power over in monotheism. But actually, our culture in the whole of Europe sits on paganism as its indigenous spirituality. And you see this throughout the history of all of our lands. So there's something about a goddess in a temple and places of worship or places of connection and imagery of her that echoes into Catholicism and more orthodox forms of Christianity, for example, where you still have the feminine in some diminished form, and no disrespect, but very diminished to what the goddess actually is. Um, but then also as a modern pagan and as a modern goddess woman, as a priestess of the goddess who has dedicated herself to walking that path of the spiritual in the everyday life. So not in a monastic sense of outside of ordinary life, very much
yeah.
in the middle of ordinary life.
Yes, by
What
the
that
way,
actually means.
yes, could you just clarify us what you mean by goddess and using the term priestess?
So, goddess is a way of naming the divine feminine. For me, and this is a personal view, it doesn't have to be anybody else's. There's no such thing as the truth that has to be truthful for everyone. Though I do think there are some fundamental principles that come with being a human being on this planet at this time that are truthful or not truthful. But that's a more political point of view. Anyway, goddess for me is a form of the divine, which is, of course, really a, a thing that you can't describe. It's a felt experience. It's a reality. It's not a fantasy. Um, and we as humans are very good at giving forms to things that are actually not necessarily defined by form. And so over time, many forms of the divine, and they were first female and then male. So first you had goddesses and then also gods. And there are many, many faces. So the feminine divine for me is actually the source, the divine source that is not necessarily gendered at all, and that encompasses, I can't speak this morning, encompasses all genders, all form of human form, because we are giving the form. We are the human brain and mind and heart creates those forms. They don't exist without us in that form, really. But because the divine can be any form, yeah, you get this interface between the land that is sentient and sacred nature and the people living as part of that land, as part of nature. In that interface, the forms of the divine arise. That is why different forms of goddesses and gods in different cultures, in different lands, in different climatic zones, in different environments, have very different forms. And so for me, goddess is this. She has many names throughout history and now in the reclaiming times of feminine-led paganism, which does not diminish the masculine at all. For me, it is incredibly inclusive. If we're not going to be inclusive, we're just repeating the patterns of monotheistic, patriarchic power over systems, which I am not interested in. That's being done everywhere, and let's be the difference. Let's be the change. So, but for me, she is this, and that is probably because I am a woman. She is this first form. And then you're looking into the historical record, the archaeological record, particularly of old Europe, which of course Hungary is like the heartland of, really, or certainly a part of. It's described by people like Maria Gimbutas and archaeologists and spiritual researchers since her as this source form of the divine, who then becomes the great mother. But she is not just the mother, she is, all aspects from birth through all the portals of the initiation stages of life into death and then returning into rebirth. And this is echoed in the great wheel of life, in the solar cycle of the year, in our own aging, in our own maturation initiation stages. So for me, goddess is this, and she has many names, and you can love her in many, many different forms, and you can love the god at the same time. She is not a jealous deity.
That's huge. And what does the term priestess means to you?
So priestess is really a name. It's an interesting word in English because we have this word priest, of course, and there are a lot of very negative connotations for many of us. There has been a lot of abuse of power in these male servants of God, if you like. That's what it means in Christianity or in Islam, to be a priest. And then there is this thing of the reclaiming of actually a role of women, of the feminine, in a spiritual life, in a spiritual role of connection, direct connection to the divine. So a huge difference between the patriarchic monotheistic religions and paganism and a goddess path on which you can be a priestess or just a devotee or a follower, whatever you want to call yourself. I will explain why I call myself a priestess. But so there is this thing that there is not just one form of goddess or god, and you have a absolute personal direct line of communication, direct contact, direct lived experience. It doesn't have to go through some conduit person, which is a priest or a bishop or whatever in more monotheistic power over structure of religion. So this is a great freedom. As a priestess, it means what it means for me, and it means slightly different things for different people who call themselves priestess, that I have dedicated to walk a spiritual path in connection to the divine feminine in one or various of her many forms, and to serve her. And what that means is not to be a servant as in a diminished sort of little woman who wipes the floors and makes the flower arrangements in the church, which is what the role of women has been diminished to in, say, the Christian church. Up to very recently, there were no women who could hold service. Now there are some in some forms of Christianity, but that's very, very recent. So a priestess is really a woman that actually I can stand for that. I can embody the sacred presence, which is another part of our particular path where we embody or put on aspect. And this is very much echoing into the ancient traditions of the goddess cultures of Europe. For example, Crete, where there is plenty of evidence that this was a common ritual, ceremonial practice, the living embodiment of goddess. Yeah, which is, of course, blasphemy to the monotheistic religions where this is not at all to be had. So for me, a priestess stands as a reclaiming, but it is also as a personal choice that this is actually the core place of my life. To live from that reality means I have to be in connection to my heart, or what people call my higher self, or love in my language, in my role as priestess of a particular deity, Rhiannon Epona. Yeah, it's the great guiding question of what love would do, which is not an easy thing to live by and which I fail at on various occasions. But that is what it means to myself to have the commitment to be a priestess to goddess in a particular form or in various forms. To be the best version of myself I can be is to serve her. To love myself and to love others is my service. To be the sacred vessel, therefore to see the body and the life force, particularly sexuality, as sacred, not as sin, not as dirty, not as somehow detached, intellect good, spirituality pure, body dirty, sinful, sexuality the great boo-boo, yeah, the downfall of mankind. This is such a dualistic separation wounding that echoes in the way we live with ourselves, in our body, in our relationships, in our relationship to nature and what we do there, which is just monstrous, really, when you look at it. How our political systems work, how our structures in society work, how we look after each other or not, how we behave. So to call myself a priestess actually has all these kind of aspects in it. It's a huge thing snapped into a little word.
Yeah, it really is. And thanks for trying to unfold it. But I would like you to clarify as well what kind of a service you exactly take. So what form does it take when it comes to your mission and your everyday life? Because as far as I know, you have workshops, you do have a mystery school, you also have travelings all around retreats in the world. So could you tell us more about how it looks like when you practice being priestess of the goddess?
Yeah, so for me, and that's again very personal and has to do with my own karma. So for me, the calling to goddess has really come through the path of sacred sexuality and all the rites of passage associated with that, which I collectively sort of call the blood mysteries. But they are not just for women. They are also, there is an equivalent initiation wheel for men. Yeah. So this is a reclaiming of our life as a woman, really, of our the sacredness of our menstrual fertility cycle, whatever form that has, and our sacred sexuality, pleasure as her ritual, and the connection again, through that layer of centuries of separation, of the sexual in connection to the heart, or the sexual in connection to love, and then that combined into the vehicle of a spiritual awakening, a spiritual connection to Goddess, to God, to sacred union. And so that for me is my personal piece, the fragment of the jewel that is me as a soul, through which my priestessing and therefore my serving her manifests in my work.